Good. Everyone signed in, best as I could tell. We're going to take the agenda items out of order. There are two. 2.1 is a recommendation for declaration of excess distribution, and 2.2 is a review of the 2002 sales tax fund financials for fiscal year June 30, 2016. I'd like to begin with 2.2, since that pretty much sets the stage for the discussion of the declaration of excess. So if you would turn to that agenda item in your agenda packet. And we'll just take a quick review of the financial results for last fiscal year. With regards to revenues, the projected revenues for 2015-16 is $25.1 million, which was a little bit higher than we had originally budgeted for, about $300,000 higher. So that bit of good news there. And from an expenditure standpoint, you'll note the total expenditures of $25.8 million. These are the actual unaudited numbers. This is how we finished that year. Somewhat lower than what was budgeted at $28.1 million. And that brings us to our deficit of $743,737 for the year. And if you'll note, the last line item under expenditures is excess reserve distribution. That is a distribution that was made in October of 2015. When we're going through the budget process, we always leave that line item blank. And once it's declared, we go back and revise the budget to include it. So the deficit is a result of the excess distribution being made, such that with the excess distribution, there will be a partial utilization of fund balance. It's expected, I guess, is what I'm saying. But nonetheless, that's where we finished the year. We had beginning retained earnings of about $17.7 million, so that the net or ending retained earnings figures is right at $17 million, $16,983,043. And then we also have the interest reserve fund. Beginning balance for a fund balance was $118,850. We had interest income of $141,381, and the interest reserve payment to the teachers is $118,169, leaving us with a fund balance reserve for the interest reserve of $378,400. So I'll ask if there are any questions before we move on to the next agenda item, because the next agenda item is basically going to take these numbers, and we'll go through a calculation that basically arrives at a per teacher amount that would be distributed if this is in fact what the committee approves once we review it. So any questions with regard to the financials? Revenues weren't quite what they were in previous years, but a little bit better than we had projected. Yes, sir.
Last year there was a set aside projected decline, right? And so I think it had been set aside, pulled out of the excess reserve. And held, I guess. So,
yes.
Can you clarify where that stands, how that works?
Well, the way that it works is, had that amount not been set aside, there would have been the excess distribution last year. The per teacher amount would have been greater, and so that would have basically increased that $743,000 deficit, because we would have distributed more that amount more over and above what was actually distributed. So that's how it comes into place. So in essence, the excess reserve distribution of 3.9 million reflects the fact that we set that aside. And as a result of that, our ending fund balance is larger. And so that larger amount's what we're going to consider. That's going to be our starting point for this discussion when we start looking at the calculation. Oh, okay. And I'll show you when we get to the next agenda item. I'll show you one correction that needs to be made in the interest reserve section, the bottom section of this report. The interest reserve payout to teachers, that $118,169, that should be in brackets. That was actually a distribution. So the end result would be ending fund balance of $142,062. So if y'all could pencil that in, because when I provide these schedules to the board at the next board meeting, I want to make that change, and I don't want to make a change without the committee members being aware of it.
And that's the amount that would be distributed as the 14th check, which is the interest on the fund, or the wording in the sales tax in May.
Okay, so we'll move on forward to the next agenda item, 2.1, recommendation for declaration of excess distribution. This is basically the financial statements that we just reviewed. We begin with pretty much the same numbers. You'll notice the deficit of $743,737 ties to the amount we just reviewed. And then to that number, we add the beginning retained earnings number of $17,726,780 to arrive at the ending fund balance of $16,983,043. So, Rudy, going back to your question, had that amount not been withheld, the $16,983,000 would have been $2.3 million less, because that's how much we withheld. So in essence, that reduction was made because we were anticipating a reduction in sales tax collections. So we didn't want to distribute it and put us in a position of actually having to go into the reserves that we try not to touch. Okay.
I guess my thought would be, I see that you're planning on doing that again, correct?
What's different this time is the amount that we're withholding, so to speak, is not the estimated reduction in revenues. It's the estimated deficit. It's a smaller number. Our revenues we're anticipating will decrease by about $1.7 million. Okay, so when that falls to the bottom line, once you deduct all of the expenses, the deficit is $1.1 million. It's about $600,000 less. So what's being withheld is not the anticipated decrease in revenues. It's the anticipated deficit once you net revenues and expenses. So it's still a withholding, but it's not the 1.7 million reduction in revenues. And that's how we'll do it going forward. When we looked at it, we said, well, rather than revenues, it should really be the deficit that we withhold. So it decreases the number a bit.
It says 7% reduction. That's what you're reading, but we're going to change the verbiage for the next board meeting.
And would it be problematic, possible for us to be able to track that line as a line?
If you look at the adopted budget for the 2002 tax for this year, That is, you can see this number. It's the budgeted deficit for the 2002 sales tax.
And then for next year at this time, when we do this again, could it be included in this report? Would that be problematic?
The budget itself? You talking about?
So for example, the report that we just received from the end year, fiscal year ended, right?
Right.
It's not separated. It's mixed with the fund balance, and I guess I'm wondering, could it be tracked as a separate item continually, as long as you do that?
In other words, arrive at the deficit amount?
Like
and
this,
then-
this 1.159, 1,000,001
Right.
that is on that line. And next year's end of year report, could it show up and see what happened to it, I guess? Just for it to be consistent and clear.
Yes, and what happens to it is it's reflected in the actual results. We're anticipating that deficit, so we're going to reduce the amount that's available for the excess distribution by that amount. So ultimately, what that does is it leaves that fund in fund balance. So at the end of this fiscal year, if we incur a $1.15 million loss, it'll net to zero, and it won't touch the 12 million that we're trying to keep safe.
I understand, and I
Okay.
agree. To be able to see it, right?
Okay. Well, if you want, but if you'd like to, just look at the adopted budget for purposes of being able to tie this number in, and look at the deficit, the budgeted deficit, and that number will tie to that figure. So the $16,983,000 fund balance is our starting point. From that number, $6 million is deducted. That represents a reserve that was established a good while back, many years ago. It started out at $5 million, and then the Blue Ribbon Committee recommended to the board to increase it to $6 million as sales tax collections got increased. It was a committee's position that reserve should increase as well. And in essence, it's just a cushion to help offset against some severe economic downturns. Subsequent to that, there were two pay increases, two $1,000 increases that were added to the teacher salary schedule and funded by the 2002 sales tax. We always put 1 year ahead of us for obvious reasons. We want that funding there to make sure the salary increase is covered. So when we back out the $6 million reserve, the standard reserve, and we back out the $3 million for each $1,000 increase, there were two, we arrive at an available amount before any other adjustments of $4,983,043. Any questions or comments at this point? Okay, from that amount, there's an adjustment. The description as it reads is withhold estimated reduction in sales tax revenue at 7%. We're gonna change that up a little bit from the standpoint that this is attributable to the fact that we're anticipating a 7% reduction in sales tax revenues, but that amount is not the anticipated decrease in revenues, it's the anticipated deficit that's generated by the decrease in revenues. So we're going to make that clear so that there's no misunderstanding, because the actual reduction in sales tax revenue is about 1.7 million. That deduction would have been larger. So this would have been estimated deficit resulting from reduction in sales tax revenues. So we'll make that change in the schedule that we present to the board at the next board meeting. we're scheduled to present it next Wednesday, on the 14th. So backing out the $1,159,122 leaves us with the amount that we're utilizing as our excess distribution. If the board declares an excess distribution based on this schedule, it would be in the amount of $3,823,921. Dividing that by the employee count, and by employee count, I mean eligible employee count of 2,169, and allowing for benefits, equates to or calculates to a per employee excess distribution amount of $1,388.73. We've included a history of 14th checks that have been given since the inception of the plan, of the tax. You can see at the bottom, just to give you an idea of how it compares, and it does make sense from the standpoint when you consider that we had an 8% reduction in sales tax collections in fiscal year 16. It would only, we would expect that amount would decrease as a result of that. Any questions or comments? We're opening up for discussion with regards to the calculation.
Again, this is going to be gross, because we get this question every year. You're going to have your withholding based on whatever your taxes are. You're going to have retirement coming out that. So everybody's going to be different.
And
call, why didn't we get $1,300? My check is $1,060.
we would anticipate it being a separate direct deposit
Yes.
amount at the end of October. We want our employees to see, those that are receiving it, we want them to see a deposit that ties to that distribution.
And if we
It's not going to
put it in
be
the check,
combined.
it would take probably it would skew your tax withholding. So a separate direct deposit was hopefully the same day as your regular deposit. I just texted the payroll person and confirmed.
Billy, are you in a position to provide us information about how many employees are currently paid out of the tax as part of the whole salary? Because, some counts that we have, we feel like might be off based on what the district is providing us.
I can give you an estimate, and once the September payroll is done and it's, when things settle pretty much, I can revise the estimate to actual, but we're at right at 60, Anthony?
About 58.
58, 60, in that neighborhood. And if you'll recall, or you may not be aware of, but during the budget process, there were 2 lab teachers that were moved to the sales tax fund. And so that, coupled with whatever the alternative education teacher slots are for this year, we'll do that calculation based on the September payroll, and that might adjust that number by a couple. It shouldn't be a lot, but that's about where we are at this point.
Do you have part-time teachers, or are all the teachers considered full-time? All considered full-time? What if you did have part-time teachers?
As far as the tax.
Then they would get a percentage of this?
They didn't know. Has to be full-time.
You have to be full-time or not?
Yes, and employed on the date of the declaration.
Yeah.
We have to have
The night of the board meeting, you have to have worked that day.
we take a picture on that day, and let me just.
You can be sick that day, but you have to have it. We put that out, see how much sick leave we have that day. That's 100% attendance. There you go.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Millington. Do I have a second to approve this excess distribution in the amount of $3,823,921, or a per eligible employee amount of $1,388.73. Do I have a second? Yes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, nay? All right. With that being said, unless there are any questions, meeting is adjourned. Very good. Thank you all for coming.